Hi, I'm Kristina Stanley, CEO of Fictionary, and today I'm going to talk about the fundamentals of book editing. So, what is story editing? First, what is book editing? Book editing is the structural edit of a novel. It's the first step in the process, which includes line editing, looking for flow, clarity, and grammar, among other things, copy editing, including every comma, every word is spelled correctly, and proofreading, ensuring accuracy after the book is set up for publishing. Story editing doesn't just look at what happens in the story, it also looks at various elements that make us care. Story isn't about a bunch of things that happened, it's about why they matter to the reader. Keeping in mind that a story editor looks at the story after it's first written and suggests major revisions to the plot, the characters, and the setting, an editor trained to know what makes a captivating story can suggest these objective revisions to make an author's great manuscript even better. Let's talk about plot. Plot is what happens in the story. The second sister in a family of 5 girls meets a wealthy and very pompous gentleman whom she vows to hate forever. But the two of them grow to appreciate each other and eventually fall in love. So yes, we're talking about Pride and Prejudice. Editing plot looks at several factors. Does every scene have a purpose related to the plot? Is the timing right for the flow of the story? What if Elizabeth had met Wickham before Darcy, for example? Do we know where the scene is taking place? Do the scenes transition smoothly? Is there some tension or conflict in every scene? And I mean every scene. Are we hooked into the scene at the beginning and again at the end, so we want to keep reading? There are ways to mark the timing of your plot so that your story really works. Fictionary has researched and found that every successful story follows the story arc. A Fictionary Story Coach edit includes listing the story arc key scenes. These include 5 plot points: the inciting incident, plot point 1, the middle point, plot point 2, and the climax. And the editor will show you how the story lines up or doesn't with the story arc. Then we move on to character. When looking at the character in a story, there are lots of things to consider. These include looking at who has the point of view, who has the role of the protagonist, making sure, this is number 3, making sure the names of the characters are both distinct. Does the author really want a Tracy, Stacy, and a Casey in their novel? Maybe, maybe not. And consistent, did the author switch names of the main character halfway through the manuscript without noticing? And I've done that. And 4th, how many scenes is each character in? A story editor will also check to make sure the protagonist and or the point of view character has a goal for the scene and for every scene, which relates back to the plot, what's at stake, and why every scene must be important to the story. Editing for a character also includes looking at dialogue, making sure it's understandable who said what, and it includes motion and emotion. No, she said versus no, she spat as she whirled to face him. Then we look at setting. This one seems kind of obvious, but there's actually a lot involved. Each scene must be happening somewhere, and it's easy to overlook in the heat of writing an amazing action scene. So let's ask ourselves some key questions. When does the scene happen relative to the last scene? Is the setting the best for emotional impact of a scene? A heated argument at home is easy. There's no witnesses and one party can walk away. But what if some argument happened in a crowded restaurant or on a plane where there's no getting away from conflict? Has the author used objects in the scene, and are they important to the plot? Did any of those objects magically appear at just the right moment? Or did the author remember to write early on that the protagonist always kept a gun in his bedside table? Have senses been used in the story? Smell to trigger a memory, or creaking of a stair to raise suspense because we know someone is coming? What about the weather? Is a storm coming to raise the tension, or in the case of poor Jane Bennet, to cause a nasty cold? Is it sunny on the day of a funeral to show contrast? Can the antagonist taste the poison in the punch or feel the spider crawling up her arm? You get the idea. Okay, now we need to talk about the structure of a novel. After these elements of plot, character and setting are consistent, there's the overall structure of the novel to consider. The story arc, of course, but also the flow of the story itself. Let's talk a moment about the word count per scene. What is the word count per scene? You must know this. If 90% of the novel scenes are 1,200 words, but there's one scene with 400 words and another with 3,200, those will need to be assessed and reworked by the author. Such anomalies will be noticed by the reader and probably not liked. It also allows you to see if the author gave critical scenes the weight they need. These scenes should be longer than the less important ones. The same with scenes per chapter. You may have one scene per chapter or many, but any vast inconsistencies will interrupt the flow of the story, and the reader will notice something feels out of place. The word count per scene and the scenes per chapter structure can also be used to control the pacing of the story. Short scenes and chapters equal a quick pace to increase attention or suspense and drive the story forward. Longer scenes or chapters create a slower pace, allowing for a breather in the action and giving the characters a chance to contemplate what's happening. So the fundamentals of book editing. By now, you get the idea that editing a story is complicated. A story editor or a writer who is performing a self-edit must have a process in place to keep track of all these elements. There's way too much information to store in your memory. It's likely that something will be missed. And this is where Fictionary Storyteller and Story Coach are indispensable tools. Both Storyteller and Story Coach allow self-editing authors and professional story editors to upload a manuscript and keep track of comprehensively and objectively the 38 Fictionary story elements related to plot, character, and setting, and of course, the story arc. We'd love it if you gave Fictionary a try. Come on over to fictionary.co and start our 2-week free trial for Storyteller or our 30-day free trial for Story Coach.